I think you got it. I figured out which ones were which, and I bet our listeners did too. So there was English, Russian, Spanish, French, Italian, Serbo-Croatian, and Portuguese.
You know what? I forgot Portuguese.
Oh.
That's the one I forgot.
Okay, go for it.
Bom dia, eu sou Susanna.
Yep, that would be Portuguese. And I really could hear the different accents in each one. I mean, there was obviously a similarity and something that carried over, but there was a different accent. And when you were talking earlier about hearing language teachers and their accents, it reminded me when I first took French in school, my first French teacher was German, and she had a pretty abysmal French accent. She had a very strong German accent. So being one of those people that doesn't hear like you do, and then hearing something and trying to imitate somebody else's really bad accent, certainly wasn't helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's fascinating, your theory on why you learned language so easily. I think that's really great. And you were just talking about that how much of language acquisitions comes from the way that we hear. And as you mentioned, we don't. We do converse with our eyes and our bodies and our, gestures and everything. And so I think even if you don't speak a language, there's a lot that you can understand if you really do watch people and listen, and you can see expression. But communication is really about being a good listener and really paying a lot of attention, as you were saying. So you do have some really great ideas in your book, Language is Music, that really go beyond merely using memorization techniques. And as you were mentioning, listening to music, I have friends that picked up Spanish watching Spanish soaps, because people are so dramatic and, they're emoting so much that you can really get an idea of what's going on easier than some other things sometimes, and also with movies. So in your book, you were mentioning some of the different ways, and so let's talk about sounds and the different sounds and some of your suggestions, and also how important do you feel that language classes are for the average person wanting to learn a language and travel to another country?
Well, I'll start with the last question first. I think language classes are important because even though I have learned a lot by listening and by watching, I did actually take classes, or I taught myself the grammar by reading a grammar book. And you have to know the structure, because there are people who maybe learn Spanish by watching telenovelas, but they may not be using the correct tenses when they should be, because they don't know the structure. And so one has to know the structure. Now, it could be that if somebody is a self-learner, they're better off just getting a book and teaching it to themselves, especially if they have an analytic mindset, because language is very analytic and it's very formula-based. And so if you know, especially like German, it follows the rules, and you learn the rules, and then you apply the rules, and there you got it. English has so many exceptions that you do have to learn. You do need a textbook or a teacher to explain to you all the exceptions. So my book is really a supplement to traditional language learning, whether it be in a classroom or using a computer-based model or using a textbook for self-study. And the prior question you had was about how much people can learn by listening. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a huge amount. And like you said, there are times when you can be in a situation where you don't even speak the language, but you understand what the person is saying, because you can tell by the tone of their voice and the emotions that they're using, the gestures and all that. And it is very important because language, the way we speak it, we have different tonalities, we have different emphasis in the way we speak. And a sentence can be extremely different depending on the way you say it. And in English, you can say a sentence that can be a question or a sentence. And it's important for somebody to be able to understand how the musicality of the language, to be able to differentiate whether the person is angry, whether the person is upset, whether the person is happy, whether the person is flirting, or whether the person is asking a question. And even in English, even in your own native language, people have communication problems because they're not listening. And so if a person tends to be a bad listener in their own language and doesn't pay attention to what other people are saying, they're most definitely going to have trouble when they're learning a foreign language, because a foreign language requires even more concentration.
That is a really good point. Another tip that you have in your book is suggesting that people might have to give up their ego, which I think is also true. I've been in countries where I asked them if they spoke English and they said no, and then I tried to talk to them in their language with, my horrible skills, and they took pity on me or decided it was really frustrating, and it turned out that they actually did speak English way better than I spoke their language, but they wanted to look good, wanted to sound good, and so they said no, they didn't know how. So it is, I agree with you, really important sometimes to give up your ego and just have fun with it.
Yeah. It is, and I think it's especially true in Asian cultures where perfection is important. And people don't want to look bad. And I think it also has something to do with the way people in Japan and Chinese-speaking countries learn their language, because their characters, they have to memorize them. It's not like they have an alphabet-based. Well, actually, I know in Japanese they do have an alphabet. One of their character systems is alphabet-based, but, they have a lot of characters that they have to memorize. So the way they learn their languages is by memorizing a whole bunch of characters. So the way they learn English is they memorize a whole bunch of words and they read the dictionary. Well, that doesn't work in English or Western-based languages or most alphabet-based languages, because we don't learn. It's not about memorization. It's about understanding how to pronounce things and how in the roots of the words and all that. And what happens when people think that they have to be perfect is that they don't speak, and then no wonder they have a bad accent because they're not practicing. And I really want people to think of language as a game. And that's why I bring in music, because if people start singing the songs in other languages, they're just going to have fun with them. I mean, I had a roommate when I was in boarding school who was from Hong Kong, and she used to listen to Cantonese pop music, which leaves a lot to be desired for my ears, because I didn't like it very much. But I heard it all the time, and I started singing Cantonese. I had absolutely no idea what I was singing. But it was kind of fun. Here I am, a 16-year-old singing Cantonese. And so people can bring in that same attitude of fun in learning languages, whether it's watching a ridiculously melodramatic soap opera from Colombia or watching somebody doing karaoke in Japan, and then that's what makes it fun. Because where do egos get you? They're a block, absolutely a block. And something that I remember when I watched the Olympics back, I think it was 2002, when what's her name? I'm blanking on her name. Well, Sarah Hughes won the gold, and she was 16 years old. Nobody thought she was going to win. Everybody thought, I think Sasha Cohen was going to win, and this other girl whose name I can't remember. And after Sarah Hughes won the gold, one of the sports announcers asked her, so what were you thinking when you were out there dancing, or figure skating rather? She said, I was doing it just to have fun. I just wanted to do my best. I wasn't thinking about winning the gold medal. And lo and behold, she won the gold, and she was just having fun, and that's the attitude, I think.
Having fun, I agree. And Susanna, there's a tremendous amount of resources mentioned in your book. There's all kinds of websites and all sorts of things, as well as many personal stories, which illustrates the points that you make throughout your book, if language is music. And you mentioned one of the sections, be part of the symphony, and you have some really great ideas for immersing yourself in the language that you'd like to learn. And being a people person, I particularly liked your suggestions on some of the local opportunities that one might access to engage native speakers in conversations. Let's talk about some of these things and how they can be used as a learning tool. Because I thought, what a great idea. And there were things like looking for interest groups or activities in your area, or